Tātou, Tarowhalava, ngā mihi nui tēnei rā. Welcome to our esteemed guests this afternoon to the Department of Public Health seminar series, organised by our wonderful co-organisers Maddie White and Brady Fraser. I'd like to welcome in particular Julia Milne, co-founder of the Common Unity Project Aotearoa. Julia was awarded the Sustainability Champion Award 2014, the Transforming Food Award 2017 from the Sustainable Business Network, the New Zealand Gardener magazine Wellington Gardener of the Year 2011, and Kiwibank Hero Award 2012, but most recently an esteemed QSM Award in 2019. So welcome to you, Julia, and also to your colleague Sarah today. We're really hoping that you're enjoying the wonderful lunch that's been supplied by Common Unity, and thank you for supporting it. It's a wonderful way to share kai and to listen to a really community-driven project and program that's been here in Wellington, particularly the Lower Hutt area, for several years. So we're very, very honoured to have you here and your kai, Julia. A little bit more about Common Unity. Common Unity is a community-based urban development project established in 2012. It is based at the ReMakery, an enterprise hub in Waiwhetu Rd, Lower Hutt. It has grown into 14 community enterprises that address community issues and challenges with more than 300 people involved. The project began by working closely with Epuni School to establish a micro-farm ensuring local children and families could be fed. There are now 11 micro-farms across the Hutt Valley, including Rimutaka Prison, where Julia tutors weekly. And the project has delivered over 7 tonnes of produce to an off-grid kitchen built in 2018, with hundreds of meals now available each week to schools and community. I think this is a fantastic contribution that you're making to our tamariki in the Hutt Valley. So welcome to our online participants as well. And of course, Julia, I'll invite Julia now to present, and we'll follow that with some questions. Welcome, Julia.
Gosh, well, after that introduction, I don't really need to say anything else because it's all really been said. But it is a beautiful thing to be here with you all today to talk about what was very much a little seed of an idea that grew from a conversation with a dear friend who happened to be the principal of a little school called Epuni School in Lower Hutt. And she was increasingly concerned about the amount of service provision that was going on in her school and around her in the community to address some of the needs of the families and whānau of the school. At that time, Epuni School was a decile 2 school, and there was a roll of about 110 students. And the school was made up of a really beautiful, diverse community with lots of different backgrounds and ethnicities and lots of different possibilities when we started asking the question of what would it look like if we worked together to form our own solution to feed our own children. So we started with a bit of a purpose and a vision around this idea of regeneration, and this collective idea of ensuring that every child had a village response, and that really fundamentally we wanted to take on, or to see if it was possible to take on, the responsibility and care of feeding all 110 students of Epuni School together without service provision, but just relying on the resources that we had. First, we needed to understand what the resources were in our community. And sometimes when we're living and working in places that feel under-resourced, our community begins to believe quite deeply that there is nothing that they have. So we did an enormous amount of work with the school, in particular the children, who we worked with some key ideas that we were now farmers, that we had one hand for giving and the other for receiving, and that those same hands could generate food, they could generate things that they maybe hadn't considered before. And so their language became quite powerful in the classroom, and we did huge amounts of work with art and this idea of creating mandalas, both personal ones, school ones, and community ones. And that is essentially what our common unity is in our space and place, is this meeting place in the name of one another for our children's sake. So we have some beautiful values that underpin that. And the one that we probably draw upon most regularly is around courage. It's an incredibly diverse piece of work that we are undertaking in the Hutt. And there are pieces of work that we follow globally now, where we see other community-led projects that are emerging that we can learn alongside and from. But I think there is plenty more scope and space for things to be enlivened in this manner in New Zealand. We started at Epuni School, and we were feeding the children within 3 months from what we were growing. And we have now morphed into looking at what a regional food network would look like if the community owned it themselves. So in year 4, it came time to move out of home at school, because some of the beautiful enterprises that the parents and whānau had initiated at the school had grown into actual little businesses, and you can't really do that at a school. So we had been operating from one classroom and had about 13 enterprises running out of that one classroom, and a half-acre to 3/4 acre amount of food. So most fortuitously, over the road there was a beautiful old rundown plaster factory, and that had come up for lease. And we managed to collaborate with the owners of that building, who gave us a lease free period for 12 months, and have now partnered with us to ensure that we get to test and try things. So our building is about 1,500 square metres. It's absolutely enormous, but we seem to fill it rather quickly, as is often the case when you tell a community that they can go for it. So one of the first projects that we got off the ground was our Beeple Honey Collective. And this is probably just one of the most beautiful stories that the project has, and our project has filled with really rich and amazing things that happen on a daily basis. But the children of Epuni had been running this thing called Project Sunshine, where basically they grew for several years these amazing fields of sunflowers, and they would harvest the seed and send that seed to other communities and schools and organisations around New Zealand, and invite them to grow sunflowers en masse too. And it had a whole lot of bee education attached to it, but it also had some really beautiful ideas about allowing children to create places and spaces in their community when often they feel that there isn't any. Because we were learning with our community and with our whānau that actually we want to live in places that are really beautiful. And that often when we asked the children what they wanted in their community, there was a couple of key things. They wanted to live in places that were beautiful, where there were trees and where there was colour. And they wanted to live in places where there was enough for everyone and where they felt safe. So Project Sunshine meant that they could light up the rest of New Zealand, and stepping out of this very myopic thinking that we sometimes have when things are really rough. And actually I can pollinate or create or change something somewhere else. So by the end of the first year, they had 300 schools that had taken on the project, but they had also raised $2,500 through their koha. And because we're a child-led, community-led organisation, we asked the children what they would like to do with that money, and they wanted to invest it to support some of the school dads to become beekeepers. So we contracted this beautiful beekeeper, Al, and he worked with some of our dads, and a year later they returned home 100 kilos of honey back to the children. And from that, we spawned this really beautiful enterprise. So we have about 80 hives now across the Hutt Valley and into Rimutaka Prison. And we have probably, I think, our harvest is still coming in, but there's probably about 3 tonnes of honey that we've brought home in the last 3 or 4 years. People can become part of that project by hosting a hive in their backyard, and a percentage of every hive gets donated back into community, and people are able to elect for themselves where they would like that to go. And the rest of it we sell to fund our lunch program and our urban kai work. So pretty early on, we realised that actually the parents, particularly the mothers at the school, didn't actually want to grow food, much to my horror, but they did really like sewing. And so we created a collective, a cooperative, So Good Cooperative, and that runs to this day. That's become quite a big project for us at the ReMakery. So pretty much it revolves around community. We have about 4 tonne of repurposed recycled textile that sits in our textile library, and that is just available for the community to sew, to make, to do. And we realised that these peripheral projects, even though they had nothing actually to do with growing carrots, kind of actually essentially were our core business, because not all the village needs to grow the food, but all the village does need to have safe places and soft landing places where they can communicate, connect, laugh, hang out, and maybe along the way develop some skills and possibilities of employment. And that's exactly what So Good has offered. And we now have a full-scale enterprise that runs, and in collaboration with 5 men who work behind the wire at Rimutaka Prison, who we have worked with to establish another So Good studio, and they sew, design and collaborate with us. Our third project that went into the ReMakery was our own plastic-free store. We in Epuni are an absolute food desert. There is no local supermarkets, and we were noticing and hearing that a lot of our local people were purchasing their food from our local dairies and just didn't have the transportation money to lots of barriers in our community to get to supermarkets. So we thought we'd start our own. So it has it says 200 members, but I believe there's actually 320. And the community runs it themselves. You can either pay $1 a week to join it, or you can do an hour via our Kitiwa time bank. And we stock it with our own produce that we grow, our own honey, and whatever it is that we are making or creating at the ReMakery. It's all plastic free, and it's all completely run by community, and our prices are cheaper than Pack and Save. Another big project for us was bikes. So touching on the lack of access to transportation, or the understanding that actually buses and public transport is really hard for our families. We started a Recycled Rides bike library where you are able to come as a family or an individual and get a bicycle for yourself, your family, whoever needs one. And we encourage families to pay with time into the project rather than money. We realise that the more we transact with time and the less we define ourselves with money, the richer we are becoming. One of our first employees was our beautiful Rochelle, and she used to run our playgroup at Epuni School, and when we shifted over the road, she came with us, and she now runs our community cafes. We have a community cafe that is open 6 days a week, and she runs that space via a time bank that I mentioned before. And the idea of our time bank is that it completely opens up the possibility of everyone being able to participate at any given time with what we are offering in the ReMakery and across the community and neighbourhood, but without having to define ourselves with money. So it means that as people input into whatever it is that we are running, particularly around the kitchen and growing of food, they are able to use their time credits to acquire the things that they need. And that's been an incredibly powerful piece of work to watch the community lose the definition of poverty, because actually poverty is more than just lack of access to money. It is how we regard ourselves and what skills and offerings we are able to make to one another. And what we have learnt through that is actually a lot of our community members really struggle with defining themselves outside of the idea of money. So having the possibility to come and learn and try new things means that they are able to transact with their community in a different way. So this is our kind of our core business. This is our urban kai farms, and lovely Sarah, who's with me here today, helped me set this up. And the idea of urban kai was to sort of transcend that idea of community gardens. So we don't really have community gardens in our community. We have lots and lots of intensive urban agriculture, drawing on the work of Curtis Stone from America, who put a beautiful model together around being able to create prodigious amounts of produce from a quarter-acre section, and that really fits with the availability of fertile soil that we have in Lower Hutt. So we have about 11 farms, and 5 of them are behind the wire at Rimutaka, and the rest are either in private backyards. Oranga Tamariki is piloting a farm with us, and locals at our local school. So, and partnering with Housing New Zealand, but I'll talk to that in a minute. So the idea of urban kai is that anyone can have our support to establish a microfarm in their backyard, and they are given full support from the collective to be able to run that. They are then asked to help others do exactly the same. They are then able to use that kai to feed themselves and their family, and the rest comes back to us to feed the rest of the community. So we've got some pretty amazing metrics that I'm just going to show off a little bit about now. But in the last 18 months, we've had about 7 tonne that's come in, but that's probably actually quite a light estimate because not everything gets metriced. One of our strengths in the Hutt Valley is that we have this river loam, and that actually, even though we have some of our hungriest citizens of New Zealand living in Lower Hutt, we are actually living upon some of the most fertile soil. So there has been something that has happened in our education and in our passing on of our knowledge that has been interrupted when we see our families struggling so hard on a quarter acre of prime fertile soil. So proportionately, it's Rimutaka Prison who have got the most impressive metrics. The guys that we work with up there, there's about 50 of them, are given full access all day long to their farms. So obviously that's reflected in the extraordinary amount that is coming in from their farms. But we're hoping to really increase the capacity of our backyard farms over the next 12 months. So we set up all of our farms using waste, and at all times are just trying to close as many loops as we possibly can. And it touches on another thing that we learnt from our Epuni community when we first started, is the reason why, or one of the barriers to being able to grow food, is families' beliefs that they need a lot of money, that a garden would start with a visit to the local garden store or to Mitre 10, but actually communities are filled with resources. They are filled with things that are being thrown out each and every day. So that's the place where we start. ReMakery has everything at any given time that anyone might need to set up a garden and to be able to do that at no cost. With all of this food, it became necessary for us to have somewhere to cook it. So we were pretty keen on the idea of building a kitchen. So we did that with a whole lot of support from our wider community and some of our funders. And we opened that last October. It runs entirely off-grid on sunshine, gas and people. It is a really beautiful thing. And every day the community is invited to come and to join us and to cook together and share. And we are producing thousands of meals that we are able to push out into the community. We don't run a food bank because that doesn't quite align with our principles and our ideas around reciprocity, but what we do believe in really strongly is gifting into the hard places. So we put our meals out into schools, into Women's Refuge, and we are just about to start a new project to feed our local homeless families in Lower Hutt, because that is the parts of our community that are doing it the hardest. But for the rest of the community that would like to come and cook or receive food, they are invited to come to our sessions in the morning where we are cooking together for children and community. They learn how, and as a result, they get to take away meals for the next few days. So through this idea of sharing and reciprocity, we can actually start to do really well. We are working with 4 schools currently, but we have ever increasing amounts of produce, which means that we are looking at doubling our capability every term. And we have a loose goal of around 2,500 meals for children by 2022. I wanted to talk about how our business model works a little bit. So obviously, being able to sustain ourselves as a little charity is really important. So the meals that you so beautifully ordered from us today, and thank you very much for your support, are all sold for $6, and for every $6 meal that is sold, we are able to gift another meal. We gift exactly the same meal, so our children are not having sandwich when you guys are having beautiful organic kai. They're having exactly the same. We all eat together, and each and every one of those ingredients, we know exactly where it's come from, who's grown it, and possibly even the whakapapa of the seed. So it's a pretty extraordinary little box of love that people get to open. I wanted to talk about my friend Fahia here. Fahia joined the project way back in October last year. She comes from Somalia and arrived here as a refugee 17 years ago. Fahia has had a lifetime living in New Zealand that she feels incredibly grateful for, but it's also been really lonely for her. And often our refugee community tells us just how lonely it is to be or to attempt to integrate into our Kiwi culture, despite all the loving hearts of the New Zealanders that welcome them. So Fahia turns up each and every day. She's the most amazing cook. She's been able to become one of our caterers, so she is starting to receive an income from the work that she is doing with us. But the thing that Fahia is most excited about is that she no longer experiences loneliness. She has family and support around her. She now has a group of people from the community who are helping her with her business plan to open her own food business. But she's also lost 15 kilos of weight. And that wasn't through any other change rather than just getting up, coming down to be with us and feeling good about herself. This is a little video that I wanted to show you that just kind of outlines the work that we're doing with Housing New Zealand. Right, I reckon
Hi, my name's Tracy. I've lived in this house for 2 years, and this is my garden. This is some of the stuff I've harvested this morning. Pumpkin and some broccoli. I've lived in many properties over the years. I have always asked the landlord, can I do a vegetable garden? And they have all said no. So when I got into Housing New Zealand house, I was happy that I was allowed to turn my backyard into a vegetable garden. Didn't think that it would be to this size, but I love it.
so fresh and crispy.
Everything that I grow goes to the ReMakery. I got you some tomatoes.
That is so awesome. Look at all those colours.
Yeah.
You can't buy that in the shops.
They have got an organisation called Urban Kai that make meals, deliver it to a women's refuge and feed, the children that go to school with no breakfast, no lunch.
That's going to be coleslaw, that's going to be salad. Thank you so much for all your hard work and for sharing this beautiful food.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I share my vegetables with everyone. I train my tomatoes to go through the fence so the public can help themselves on the other side, and same with my raspberries. Making other people happy just makes me happy, and I'm glad it gets donated to the Women's Refuge because they are the ones that helped me get this house in the first place. I just applied to do level 3 in horticulture so I can get the qualifications and do what I love doing as a job. This house has given me the launch pad that I need to live the life that I love.
So the next iteration of our work with Housing New Zealand is to establish an agri-hood. So with Tracy now leading the project in her local community, we have a cluster of 5 families who are all now converting their backyards into micro farms, and they will essentially use exactly the same Urban Kai model, except that we've realised that there is opportunity and scope for them to be feeding into their local food network. And we're really excited about this idea that we can assist them with generating income from their backyards, that they may be able to help their local people connect with locally produced food. Because we're realising that actually in the face of climate change, we all know that we need to be shortening up the supply chains of our food, and that's an incredibly vulnerable thing when we start looking at where it is that our food is coming from. So that's going to be 12 months of dedicated work with Tracy and mentors and working in unison with Housing New Zealand. So we're pretty excited to see what will evolve from that. This is my current project that I'm working on, and this is our partnership that we have at Rimutaka Prison. And I just really wanted to, this is my last story of the day, I promise. But we were really interested in this idea of looking really hard at what was happening in our prison and how that connects to our local community. And with this idea that actually we throw away a lot of things, but that we also throw away people, and that our children of our local community feel and see that really strongly, that often they can talk of the trajectory that they are on and believe that at any given time as an adult, they will end up incarcerated like their parents, grandparents, and often several generations before. So we understood through listening really hard that actually a prison isn't something that sits on the outside of our community. It actually needs to sit within our heart. So we created a pretty special memorandum of understanding with Rimutaka to test and try some new ideas. And we now work with 5 units up at the prison. So we grow prodigious amounts of food, and you've seen that in our metrics, but we're also given opportunity to test and try enterprise up there. So we have men that are sewing. We have men that are dedicated to growing and producing enormous amounts of food, and now talk about how excited that they are now that they can take those skills out with them when they leave prison. But we're also creating educational resources for them to be able to help whānau while they're still in prison, along with our seed bank that we can be sharing and distributing the seed that the men are growing. They are learning about honey and beekeeping, but they're also learning about how to set up a backyard business with absolutely nothing. The strawberry field that you can see in that picture grew from a collaboration that we have with Coffee Supreme. Coffee Supreme came along right at the start of our move to the ReMakery and really kindly donated us a coffee machine and a lifetime supply of coffee. But what they also gave us was all of their waste resources. So we started taking those waste resources up to the prison, the sacks, the chaff, the spent grinds, and we created a berry field. And using some propagated strawberries that were given from some other part of the prison, we've got a 600 plant berry field that's cost absolutely nothing, that is now absorbing all of the waste from a local business. So that's really powerful stuff for our men to be learning and understanding as they too begin to explore this idea of living life well without money. I wanted to actually finish by sharing a little, some reflections from one of the guys who got out of prison, who had been working with us while he was in there. And with his permission, I'm just going to read to you what, but I'll stand in front of the microphone, what gardening behind the wire meant for him. I spent 10 years on the inside, and since leaving prison, it has been a daily struggle to push myself to create a network of support and to help myself. Gardening on the inside meant I could feel connected. I had a work ethic and felt empathy to grow food so our children can eat. I was part of something important. It was scary to leave prison after so long, but I felt safe and part of the community I had already begun to work with. I am grateful and feel that I have been given a chance because of the willingness of others to support me. Every connection I made on the inside has been most important for me on the outside and for my reintegration. I feel like I am a valued member of community. And when we put that in the context of 60% of our men returning to prison within 3 years of release, we understand the importance to try new things in the places that are really hard. Thank you for listening to me today. Here are some contact details if you would like to get in touch with us, if you would like to know more about how you could become involved, or if you just want to come and have a cup of coffee in our cafe and hang out a little. Kia kaha to you all, and I'm really happy to take any questions.
Oh, kia ora, Julia. It's like fantastic, because there's several of us here in the room who have a real passion and interest in prisoner health. And this is exactly how it's supposed to be, right? So garden on the inside. And to hear the words sharing and reciprocity, gifting to whānau doing it hardest. Yeah, it's truly, truly public health model, but really inspiring. And, you know, prison gardens have always been part of the future of the incarceration wall, actually. And I worked in Aotearoa Prison for several years, so I purchased 200 natives from there, which is now at our family house. But to see it this way, to have a strawberry garden and the stories of those inside, you know, sharing what's possible, what needs to occur. I think it's just thanks, Brodie and Maddie, for making this happen for us. So anyway, I would like to open up the floor for questions.
Hi, Julia. I'm Amy. I'm the gardener at Lyell Bay School. I left an office job to take up this role, and I've spent the last 3 months working with the children to grow vegetables from seeds, many of whom had never grown them before. Where I live in Lyell Bay and Kilbirnie, we have a lot of land that is either in people's houses, or we have earthquake-prone buildings that have back gardens that have weeds in them. We've got huge reserves, which basically I look at these places and I think there could be things growing here for our community. Do you have any advice for how to go about contacting places like the council or you know, people who are kind of responsible for these areas of land who may you know, need to get on board to initiate something like this in our area in the eastern suburbs?
Yep. Great. It's lovely to hear that you're thinking like that, because I know that there are many others out your way that are thinking that too, the how. So Amy Bird at Wellington Council would be the person to get hold of. They've got some pretty impressive maps around organisations and land and things that you can and cannot do. And she'd be really keen to hear from you and connect you with other people that I think are thinking the same thing. I'd also love to help in any way, and maybe you should come and have a cup of coffee with us and, yeah, share some story and eat some cake.
Great presentation, thanks so much. I've heard, there are some types of school programs for school gardening, but you seem to have done things on a vastly better and larger scale. But can you make some comparisons between those two approaches, and what's needed to make this sort of thing happen in all schools?
Courage, but I think where we are maybe a little bit different from other schemes and programs that are running in schools is the idea of allowing things to be community-led. And, I think it would have been a much easier and probably much cheaper option for the community to simply bring some programs in and run them like they are run in every other community around New Zealand. But I think it would have been a lost opportunity, and it wouldn't perhaps have been had the possibility of sustaining itself forever. And I think also every community, when they are asked to create a food response or even a response around the care of their children, it will always look different dependent on the resources that they have. And this is how it looked for us, but I'm thinking it would probably look quite different in Lyell Bay or anywhere else. And I guess the other thing is that actually it's always about circles for us rather than linear constructs. And so always working with the idea of the end goal in mind, where we're simply not needed anymore. And when you start with that kind of thinking, things tend to evolve quite differently, because at any given time, you're trying not to be there and trying to implant that knowledge in community where it needs to be, whilst listening to that community and really supporting hard in what it is that they want or how it is they want to respond to their own needs. And I think we need to be learning and listening a lot more. Some of the strongest messaging and ideas that we've ever had for the project have actually come from working with the men at Rimutaka, because a lot of them started off as the hungry kid with no lunch, or having difficulties in the home around violence or housing instability. So we see quite clearly the trajectory that our children are on, but they've also got the best ideas, these guys, of how to fix it. And they also want to respond, which I think is also the healing part that needs to be considered as we look at addressing our recidivism. Sorry, that's quite a long answer, isn't it?
Hi, I'm Ben Gray. I work at Newtown Union Health Service and here. And I'm involved in a number of voluntary organisations, and the thing that always worries me is what the vulnerability of the organisation is in terms of, if you like, the back office stuff. You talk about employing some people. That means you've got to have accounts and someone who's following the money and making sure you're not going to suddenly run out, and then, there's a whole lot of that sort of thing. How have you gone, particularly in terms of upscaling and getting bigger? What are the things that scare you the most?
Keeping the lights on scares us. So I have 7 staff now, and always trying to create sustainability around how it is that we're funding ourselves, but we're a long way off. We're still 70% reliant upon external funding. But we have some plans and strategies on a yearly basis of how we address that. And yeah, you're right, this is, we're not well resourced at all, but we just got to keep stepping out and hoping that our funders and our supporters will understand what it is that we're trying to do, which is definitely messier and definitely probably more expensive, but I believe incredibly crucial and in the long term really sustainable.
Kia ora, I'm going to ask a question before I pass it on to somebody else. I absolutely love the presentation. I'm so pleased that you've come to speak to us. You're talking about how very early on, and you mentioned it in response to Nick's question, around the service provision and how you wanted to do things really differently. Have you noticed some of the programs that are like outside of the ReMakery that are in the Hutt, that they've changed their models, or that they've changed how they engage with the community, or that they're more responsive to the community's ideas about how to continue service provision, if that's what they're doing?
It's a good question. We know that there are organisations that are currently undertaking some evaluation to have a look at what it is that they are doing. And in this, I think there's a big shift towards community-led and community-embedded solutions. So we're not the only ones thinking like this, but there's just an awful lot of people thinking how. We know that we are having an impact in accordance with the amount of people that are contacting us and coming to visit us on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And that used to be just from people in the neighbourhood, but now it's across New Zealand and beyond. And that's a really big thing in itself for us to be able to respond to in a little organisation that doesn't have the resourcing so much to be able to handle that. So I think there needs to be some frameworks built around this kind of thing, around sharing of information, because I think there's probably a lot of people trying to do similar things, but we're just not terribly well connected.
Kia ora, thanks for your talk. I wanted to ask, with regard to your programs in prisons, I was wondering what other prisoner advocacy organisations you're connected to and how that pans out.
So we, who do we work with? We work with several up at Rimutaka Prison, but we tend to not do any advocacy ourselves. We're not there as advocacy specialists. We're not trying to meet the needs. We're not social workers. We are just simply people that come in that are community connectors, and that's quite a different conversation. The team of people that come into prison with me every week are gardeners, sewers, people who like to make, fix, build and do, but they're not doing any advocacy per se in the wider community. And I think we don't have to be all things to all people, but we do see that there is an enormous amount of advocacy and support going on from other organisations in the prison. I think actually there's about 200 different organisations in our local prison currently. And they're not terribly well connected either. So that might be a good place to start if someone wants a project.
It was an offshoot of that bit. And so on and so on and so on. Do you have a picture either in your mind or on your wall somewhere with all the bits which you would obviously then be adding onto? It was sort of, I had this spider diagram in my mind. And do you have one of those?
Yeah, it was actually in the mandala, I think in the, see if I can find it. There. But that keeps growing. That was, oh no, not there. I can see it. There we go. Yeah. Pretty. So that's our cafe wall, and that was what we were doing 12 months ago. So that's kind of our core projects. You'll see some tiny houses being built and lots of kind of crazy things going on there. But each and every one of those projects has had little offshoots. But I kind of figured that that's actually what a village is. It's an ecology, it's growing. And I think when you're working with the metaphor of growing anyway, you're just asking for trouble. But yeah, I'm seeing circles, a lot of circles, which is heartening to me because all these things need to be connected, which is why it is that, you know, to feed children and get a pot of soup going, the knitting group is really important. Whatever it is that brings people into the whare, that connects and creates conversation, it's just as important as the carrot in the field.
Hello, that's great. I was going to ask you about the kind of organic ethic that you have here, and how this works with people starting up in their backyards, because as I can attest with my aphid-infested kale at the moment, although a whole backyard of beautiful rocket, if you're interested. Trying to get a balance of all the foods that you would like to grow is not easy. So do they tend to come along and kind of learn in the community areas and then take these messages back home?
Yes, well, they can learn in their own garden, in their own backyard, and they will have a team of people that come and do that for them. Because we learnt that actually our community really likes it when people are around them, and sometimes gardening felt like it was a bit of a lonely business. So we kind of do it in packs now, which is really social and really beautiful. We have a really lovely meetup on a Saturday morning at 10 o'clock if anyone is interested, and everyone comes for a coffee at the ReMakery, and then we head out to one or two of the farms for the morning. And it's just a really lovely thing to spend time with one another. Come and join us.
Well, I've just got one request. Maybe a volunteer can have for lunch and tell us what beautiful things is in the box. Go on.
Okay, I'll do it. Because I had a lunch and it was really brilliant. There was a beautiful little salad with, that's just my remnants. Yeah, sorry, there's nothing there. And a quiche and some tamarillo and a little baby carrot and lettuces. It was delightful. And a beetroot relish. It's really great. Thank you.
Well, I think you know where Julia is based in the Hutt. If you need to contact her, please do. But on behalf of all of us, Julia, here in the department, and our friends who have joined us from afar and wherever you've come from, I think we can all join together and give Julia a big hand.